All right, welcome everyone. Good morning. This is the Judiciary Committee. We have two agendas today. The first is at 9:30. This is decision-making only on two judicial nominations that we heard. I can't remember when we heard you guys yesterday. Sorry. First up on this one is Governor's Message 796, submitting for consideration and confirmation as Circuit Court Judge of the Circuit Court of the Second Circuit, Maui County, gubernatorial appointee Annalisa M. Bernard Lee for a term to expire in 10 years. The recommendation on GM 796 is to consent. Questions or concerns? If not, Vice Chair.
On GM 796, Chair's recommendation is to consent. Chair Rhodes?
Aye.
Vice Chair Woods, aye. Senator Chang?
Aye.
Senator San Buenaventura?
Excused.
Senator Owa?
Aye.
Measure is adopted.
Great, thank you. Congratulations. The second item on the agenda is GM 797, submitting for consideration and confirmation as Circuit Court Judge of the Circuit of the Fifth Circuit, Island of County of Kauai, gubernatorial appointee Michael K. Soong for a term to expire in 10 years. Also on this one, the recommendation is to consent. Questions or concerns? If not, Vice Chair.
On GM 797, the recommendation is to consent. Any noes or reservations? Hearing none, the measure is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations. And this agenda is adjourned. All right, welcome everyone to the Judiciary Committee hearing. This is our 9:40 agenda, Wednesday, April 22, here in 225. This agenda has Governor's Message 801, submitting for consideration and confirmation as Chief Justice of the Hawaii State Supreme Court, gubernatorial appointee Vladimir P. Devins for a term to expire in 10 years. We do have a 2-minute time limit on testimony, both on Zoom and in person. If we have a catastrophic Zoom failure, we'll try again on Friday, April 24 at 10:25 in this same room, 225. If you're, we won't be voting today on this nomination. That will be at 10 a.m. on Friday, April 24, in this room, 225. All right, first up on GM's 801 is Will Kane, Senior Advisor to the Governor. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Will Kane, Office of the Governor. I'm sure the people behind me will be much better able to describe all the great things about Justice Devins, but on behalf of the Governor, we just want to say first to the committee, thank you for your consideration of him for the Chief Justice role. And you know, he has served for a short time on the court, but I think even in that time, he's already had an amazing impact, and his experience in the field will add greatly to this, and especially as the Chief Justice. So I'm here for any questions, and mahalo again.
Thank you very much. Next up is Steve Alm, Prosecuting Attorney, City and County of Honolulu. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Rhodes, Vice Chair Gabbard, members of the committee. I'm Steve Alm, the Honolulu prosecutor. I'm here in strong support of Justice Devins. He and I were on opposite sides on certain issues when he was in private practice. And I've agreed with some of the his decisions when he was on the Supreme Court, and have disagreed with others. But I think he's got a great background for this. Working at the police department, he saw people up front, he saw people victims, working with them. And Justice Devins is smart, he's honest, he's strong, and he's decisive. And I think that's what the judiciary will need, and he'll do a great job at it. So I'm standing in strong support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Michael Formby, Managing Director, City and County of Honolulu, in support. Evan Oe, Executive Director for Hawaii Association for Justice, in support. Thank you. Next is Kalani Warner, State Director for UP United Public Workers. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Rhodes, Vice Chair Gabbard, members of the committee, Kamakana Kaimaloa, speaking on behalf of State Director Kalani Warner. You have our testimony in strong support, so I'll just add a few other comments. As you can imagine, relations between an employer and an exclusive representative is adversarial by its very nature. However, prior to his retirement, UPW had developed a strong working relationship with Chief Justice Rectenwald and his staff. That was critical to some of the biggest challenges we had encountered, particularly THP, which they were willing to settle, and one of the first one to do so. We believe that Justice Devens, by his background, he understands the challenges that UPW members face, as well as he understands our history. And so we believe that he could pick up where Chief Justice Rectenwald had left off, and that's one of the main reasons we support his confirmation. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Randy Pereira, Executive Director, Hawaii Government Employees Association. Excuse me. Good morning.
Morning. Chair, members, my name is Randy Pereira. I'm the Executive Director of the HGEA and President of the Hawaii State AFL-CIO, so I'll spare some time and testify on behalf of both. We are in complete and unequivocal support of Justice Devens' nomination, and I'll echo the words of the UPW in suggesting that our testimony is not only going to the character of this individual, but also our belief that he is the best suited to serve as the administrator of the judiciary, where we represent the great majority of employees. And certainly I'll be willing to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Daniel Padilla, for President of Hawaii Filipino Lawyers Association. In support, Elena Lay McFarland, founder for Nawahini Toa Foundation. Also in support, George Paris for Ironworkers Stabilization Fund, Local 625. Morning, or his designee. Morning.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. My name is Cliff LeBoy. I am representing T. George Paris and the Ironworkers Stabilization Fund, and also the Sheet Metal Union, Arthur Tolentino. We submitted our testimony. We strongly support this Chief Justice position. He has come across and done a lot of good things with his background, his sound judgment, and all of that. I only wish we could have this hearing on a weekend, because if you look behind me, these people represent over 100,000 other people that would strongly support this. So we ask you for, please get this thing done, pass it through, and if you have any questions, let us know.
Okay, thank you. Next is Mark Rectenwald, retired Chief Justice. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Chair Rhodes, Vice Chair Gabbard, members of the committee. You think I wouldn't be nervous at this point, but I am, because it's such an important day. And I'm very, very grateful and honored to be here to testify in strong support of Justice Devens for the position of Chief Justice. You know, he has a lot of qualities I think will make him a wonderful Chief Justice. He's hardworking, he's smart, he's got, I think, 3 decades of experience as a litigator. He was out in the trenches as a practicing lawyer for all those 30 years. So he knows the law inside and out. He knows how to understand a case, analyze it, and see both sides. I think his experience as a labor lawyer is particularly relevant. He's one of the foremost labor lawyers in our state, and I used to practice in that area as well. And to me, a really good labor lawyer advocates hard for their clients, but also understands how to see what the other side is, where the other side is coming from, and be able to come to a resolution that's fair. And I think that's really what Justice Devens is about. When he came to the court, I got to know him very, very well. Obviously, before that, I knew him well too, because he had done an awful lot in our community to support the bar, to have good relations between the courts and the bar and the Hawaii State Bar Association, in support of access to justice. And then when he came to the court, I met a colleague who was a wonderful, supportive colleague, somebody who worked incredibly hard. If I had to say one thing about this man, I'd say one of the hardest workers I've ever seen. He prepares well, he listens to both sides when we have oral argument, he makes a call, and then he goes and he writes really good opinions, and he writes them in a timely manner. And he also knows how to understand our judiciary, work with people in the judiciary. I had assigned him to lead a committee on artificial intelligence, which is a really big endeavor, and he and his co-chair did a wonderful job of that. So I'm here in strong support of Justice Devens for this position.
Thank you very much. Next up is Robert D.S. Kim, retired Chief Administrative Judge in the Third Circuit. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Rhodes, Vice Chair Gabbard. every 10 years, there's an important decision that needs to be made, and today is that day, determining who is going to be the Chief Justice of the third branch of government in the state of Hawaii. As a Chief Judge, I worked closely with retired Chief Justice Rechtenwald. I saw firsthand what the job requires. It's a 7-day-a-week, 10-year job that Justice Devens is aptly suited to serve. It's a hard job, and he stepped up, and I believe he will do an excellent job. There are many, although I'm speaking as a private citizen, I speak to many judges. I speak to people, staff members and the like, and they are looking forward to working with the nominee, Justice Devens. And so I humbly and respectfully request you support the judiciary with new leadership that will support C.J. Rechtenwald's initiatives and carry us into the next decade. I can answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Keani Alapa. Good morning.
Morning. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Keani Alapa, and I'm a law partner at Alapa & Otake. Vlad gave me my start in this profession and served as my mentor, friend, and law partner for over a decade. He hired me as a summer law clerk after my first year of law school, and that first experience working for him changed the course of my life and my career. I did not come into law polished. I'm a country boy from the North Shore. I stumbled into college because of football, and I stumbled into law school on a whim. I came into this profession rough around the edges with no real connection to the law. Vlad taught me that hard work is a great equalizer, and he did not just say it, he lived it. True mentorship in the practice of law, especially in Hawaii, is becoming far too rare, but Vlad took it upon himself to truly mentor me. He spent countless hours investing in me when he did not have to. He would stay up until 3 a.m. revising my motions, then take the time the next day to explain his edits so that I could learn from them. He sat through all of my depositions, oral arguments, arbitration, and other proceedings. And afterward, he gave me honest, thoughtful feedback on how to improve. Through all of it, he taught me that every client deserves your full effort, whether the case is big or small, that your word is your bond, and once your credibility is gone, it is gone. And that zealous advocacy does not mean being a bully. You can fight hard for your clients, stay within the rules, and still treat people with decency and respect. I worked for Vlad for more than a decade, representing working families, public unions, injured workers, and people going through some of the hardest times in their lives. He understood that you cannot truly represent a client well unless you know them as a person, earn their trust, and understand what matters most to them. When Vlad left private practice for the bench, it was bittersweet for me. I lost my mentor, my partner, and one of my closest friends, but Hawaii gained the justice with deep roots here, a real understanding of the people and communities our courts serve, and a clear sense of what this profession should be. If he is confirmed as Chief Justice, our judiciary will be led by someone who knows this community, cares deeply about the practice of law, is a natural mentor, and will strengthen both the courts and the public's trust in them. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thanks very much. Next up is Chuck Friedman. Good morning.
Morning, members. Morning, Chair. Sorry, I'm an old man. Last time I testified in this room, I was testifying on election law for Gene King, and Tony Chang was the chair. That was the last time I was here. Honorable Committee, I'm testifying against. My objections stem from the concentration of power by the Hawaii State Carpenters Union in all 3 branches of our government with this appointment. Details are in my written testimony. I hope you'll read them. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. We have watched this happen with the Carpenters Union, mostly in silence. It's time for the sirens to go off. I think you should ask Justice Devens questions like these. If the huge Pacific Health and HMSA proposed partnership were litigated up and heard at the Supreme Court, which I think we all expect expect will happen, would your associations with the union, which I understand is an investor in Straub, cause you to recuse yourself? If the union's super PAC, number two, if the union super PAC continues to try to buy elections and their actions end up before you, yes or no, would you recuse yourself? And three, though you twice did not publicly disclose your business relationship, including 4 years on the board of the Carpenter Super PAC, be changed now, what a joke. You irrefutably had such a relationship. Do you agree to recuse yourself from this connection? And in any and all Carpenters Union cases which will come before the court, we depend on the Chief Justice not only for their knowledge of law, but for their awareness. Is this nominee self-aware? Does he understand that some of the ground he comes from and stands on is shaky and even toxic? Familiar ground he failed to disclose, as was recently reported in Civil Beat. A former justice,
I'm sorry,
Jim.
your time has expired. Thank you very much. Next up is Stanley Rorick on Zoom, maybe?
Thank you.
President Chair.
Good morning.
Hey, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me and see me, Mr.
Sorry,
Chairman?
yes, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay. My name's Stan Rohrig. I'm a lawyer in Hilo. In another life, I was in the legislature, and one of my close friends was Mr. Paul Devens. He was city and county attorney. As the chairman of his Judiciary Committee, I spent many hours with him, and we talked about many things, including his son. And one of the things that impressed me with Paul and with his son now is that these are local boys. And I'm a local boy lawyer from Manoa. And I think local boy lawyers, we're all minorities here in Hawaii. We're used to the bumps and grinds of fighting hard for our clients. And just because we have a set of clients and we fight for them on Monday doesn't mean that we let the bus roll over us on Friday when we represent somebody else against our former client. I don't think Justice Edens is that shallow that he's not going to respect the prior history of all the different groups of people that come before him as private counsel or when he's Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. This guy is right on the money. He has enough guts that he's going to be a great leader for us. And now is the time, and we ought to get behind him. I appreciate your folks' attention and the opportunity to speak in his favor. And I wish you well, and I hope you vote for him. And I look forward to seeing him being the chief administrator of our judiciary. It's very important to us, especially as Makuli lawyers who've been here our whole life. We want to see the judiciary.
Thank you very much. Your time has expired. Thank you for coming. Next up is Kate Watanabe, Financial Secretary Treasurer for Unite Here Local 5, and support. Ana Tuia Sosopo, District Rep and Trustee for Operating Engineers Local 3. In support, Christian Fern, Executive Director for University of Hawaii Professional Assembly. In support, Dustin Dawson, Director for Hawaii Longshore Division ILWU. In support, Randy Pereira for AFL-CIO will take your testimony and support from before. Osa Tui for President for Hawaii State Teachers Association. In support. Rosalie Agas Yu for Hawaii Nurses Association, OPEIU Local 50. In support. Tony Baldemaro for IBEW 1260. In support. Lonnie Wong for Common Cause in opposition. Don Faumuina for State of Hawaii Organization of Police Officers. Come on up. Morning.
Good morning. Chair Rose, Vice Chair Gabbard, and members of the committee. My name is Don Faumuina, and I'm the president of for Shopo. I bring to you the aloha of 2,500 members across the 4 counties of Hawaii in full support of Justice Devens. Justice Devens has been Shopo's legal counsel for a couple decades, and he's been paramount in the success of where Shopo is today. I just wanted to share that I've known this man. I've seen his work ethics. He is just, he is kind, he's trustworthy, and this is the type of people that we need there to ensure that things are taken care of. And we just want to be here to show our full support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Blaine Kobayashi, retired judge for the Second Circuit, in support. Melvin Fujino, retired judge for the Third Circuit, in support. Gil Keith Agaron, former chair of this committee, in support. Kerry Tanaka, in support. Lon Peressa, in support. Patrick Wax Wisbarth, in support. Ted H.S. Hong, in support. Michael Uyasuye, in support. If any of you are here and you want to testify, please jump up. Winton Park, in support. Ann Botticelli, in opposition. Kevin Sumida, in support. Kenneth Lawson, in support. Brent Kolbus, in opposition. Coralie Matayoshi, in support. Thomas Berger, in support. Natalie Awasa with comments. Derek Kobayashi, in support. Haley Cheng, in support. Rod Miley, in support. Steve Tevis, I thought. In support. Deborah Kagawa Yogi, in support. Levi K. Ho'okano, in support. And Tanari Ma'afala, in support. That is, other than the HSBA representative, that's everyone who signed up on GM 801. Would anyone else like to testify on GM 801, either here or on Zoom? Yep, please, come on up. Morning.
Morning, Chair Rhodes, Vice Chair Gabbard, members of the committee. Brandon Kimura, Administrative Director of the Courts, here to testify in my personal capacity and strong support. I've had the opportunity and the honor of working closely with Chief Justice Rechtenwald in his chambers on cases and other matters for a year, and then approximately 10 more years working closely with him in support of his administrative role leading the judiciary. I've also had the honor of working closely with Acting Chief Justice McKenna for nearly 7 months. Thanks to Chief Justice Rechtenwald and Chief Justice McKenna, I've had the good fortune to engage and collaborate with many judicial and administrative leaders in other jurisdictions, and here to share thoughts based on some familiarity with the challenges and opportunities of the position of Chief Justice of the Hawaii Supreme Court. First, the position requires a superhuman work ethic because the role requires incredible empathy and an openness to listen with genuine interest and understanding. It requires a deep familiarity with the practice of law, nuances in the practice in different areas, and how things sometimes are done differently across the state because of different resources. It requires an appreciation of the hard work by civil servants, administrators, and judges across the judiciary and across the justice system who are committed to service and have much experience facing and resolving challenges through their own hard work and innovation. It requires a particular mindset to be the leader of the third branch of government and a leader of the justice system. The role requires an unending drive and urgency to safeguard and improve the justice system in every possible way, and while acutely sensitive to how the justice system reaches individuals and families and communities, often at their most critical juncture in their lives, and all interests and stakeholders. The role requires courage and constant reflection on our North Star, which is the importance of the rule of law to the democratic structure and social fabric of our society, and for each case, the applicable law. As I've had the privilege of seeing with Chief Justice Rechtenwald and Chief Justice McKenna, I'm confident that Justice Devens possesses these qualities in abundance, and I'm confident he'll be an extraordinary Chief Justice. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to testify in GM 801? Yep, come on up. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Rhodes and Vice Chair Gabbard and members of the committee. My name is Chris West. I am the president of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union. I apologize for not having my name on that list there. But I felt compelled to come this morning to express some of the concerns and the worries of my members, 16,000 across the state of Hawaii, that are worried about their future, right? I wear two hats today. I wear a hat as a union president and a representative of many working class people across the state of Hawaii. And as you folks are very aware of, many of our local families are hurting right now. They're hurting, they're in pain, and the suffering comes from watching their families and their children move away from home. Watching their ability to have their children raised in the place that they grew up in evaporate right in front of them. Now, we have a unique opportunity to have someone who was born and raised here to sit in the highest position and to have a care and a love for this state and this home that we grew up in that not everyone may be able to relate to. And so I sit here strongly in support for Justice Devin, because I think that we're at a turning point now where many local families are looking for that help. They're looking for that support. They're looking for those that understand our pain and our suffering and are hoping that the lawmakers can feel that and can understand that, and we need that help. And we need someone that can feel it, that can understand it, and can relate to the struggles that we have as local working families here. So I'm open for any questions as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Would anyone else like to testify on GM 801? GM 801. Okay, seeing none. Members, any questions for the testifiers to this point? Okay, seeing none. Mark K. Murakami, President of Hawaii State Bar Association. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Rhodes, Vice Chair Gabbard, members of the committee. Mark K. Murakami on behalf of the Hawaii State Bar Association. As set forth in our written testimony, we've gone through our normal rigorous process. We have found Justice Devins qualified for the position of Chief Justice.
Okay, great. Members, questions? Okay, thank you. Next, Justice Devins, if you'd like to make an opening statement. I didn't see where you sat down. I saw you were here. Okay, there you go. Good morning.
Morning. Morning, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, honorable members of this committee. I want to start by giving a little bit about my background for those who may not be as familiar with where I've been and how I got to this spot today. I'm born and raised here in Honolulu. Other than going away to the mainland, I've spent my entire life here. This is where I got married. This is where I raised my kids. I had the opportunity to go away for school, and I took that opportunity. I had to get student loans to pay my way through school. I went to the mainland. I was accepted at the UC Berkeley University in the Bay Area. I had to work extremely hard there because although it was a struggle for me, I didn't want to come home in shame that I was not able to graduate and make it through at a mainland school of that caliber. It was very academically challenging for me. I had to work extremely hard to get through it, but through perseverance, I was able to obtain a degree in economics. I graduated magna cum laude and received Phi Beta Kappa honors. I came home and I spent 6 years in the police department. It was a place that I enjoyed very much. It taught me lessons that carried me through in my practice in understanding the struggles that are out there. The revolving door that we always talk about, I was part of it because I was involved in arrests and I saw how there was a lack of services. Some people bring things onto their own selves, but I could see the struggles that they were going through, and it taught me very strong lessons that I've always carried through with me. I, of course, graduated from UC Berkeley Law School, and I went into private practice, and that's where I spent 30-plus years as a trial lawyer. I always wanted to be the best trial lawyer I could. As I progressed during my career, I had been asked by other circuit court judges to consider applying for a judgeship. At that time, it didn't really interest me because I enjoyed the trial work. I enjoyed the clients that I got to represent, and it was a plaintiff's practice. I also, of course, with labor law, I got to represent various public unions as well as a private sector union. My law firm and my partner, Kiani Alapo, who you're from earlier, we took great pride in representing the working families of Hawaii. In the practice, I made sure to involve myself in the legal community. I was on the HSBA bar board for a number of years. I also participated on the Judicial Administration Committee, where I served for many years and co-chaired that committee with Justice Akoba. And after I got appointed to the bench, I actually asked to stay on that committee, even though it's an HSBA committee, to continue co-chairing it, because I thought it kept me close to the bar and kept my ear to the ground to understand what problems the bar was having, and to try and pick up on those issues and get them addressed with the judiciary as soon as we could. So that is a committee I enjoyed, and I continue to serve on that committee. My transition to the court, for me, I hit the ground running. I didn't find any issues with the transition. I thought it was pretty smooth. Learning the mechanics of the court, both substantively and operational, came easy to me. The workload is very comfortable. I've been told that in the last 2 years, the court has been some of the busiest times that it's had over the last several years. I'm very comfortable with that pace. Compared to my private practice load, I would say the private practice was much heavier, but something that I'm very comfortable with. I've already issued multiple opinions already, including unanimous, majority, and a few dissents as well. It's a very collegial court. They've been very welcoming to me, and I've appreciated and I take pride in serving there. You know, during my meetings with you committee members, it was at least reassuring to me that no one really had a question about my ability to discharge the duties there, as far as my capabilities, my legal qualifications, and that was reassuring because you don't really get a lot of feedback as far as how well you may or may not be doing or how you're perceived. One of the things that I know is a concern, and it's always been my primary concern, is the backlog. But I can tell you that when I first came on board, I went over to the ICA, and they had explained to me when Acting Chief Judge Leonard was presiding on the changes she had made. And you can see from the ICA backlog that it made great strides in cutting down that backlog. As I understand it, they're at or close to 2024. And although that sounds still a ways off, relatively speaking, those are great strides. And I know that Chief Judge Nakasone is continuing on that path and making further adjustments as we continue to knock that backlog down. So of course, for any new incoming Chief Justice, the backlog is, and I'm sure will remain, a primary concern to make sure that we get that chopped down to a reasonable time period. If I'm given that opportunity, that is something that I will do everything I can to make sure that we bring it within a reasonable time period so that justice is served in a timely manner. For me, the biggest challenge for the Chief Justice's position is, of course, the administrative side to the job. You're the administrative head of the judiciary in that position. I had to do some self-reflecting on my own before I committed to this process to see what experience I had, what I could use in fulfilling these duties, and not just discharging the duties, but trying to discharge it at the highest level possible. And I have had experience, 25 plus years of experience dealing with various management issues, and that came through my labor experience, my labor practice. I've been exposed to a variety of complicated management issues. I've dealt with budgets, finance, CIP capital improvement projects, disciplinary matters, suspensions, terminations, disciplinary transfers, disciplinary demotions, overtime issues, comp time issues, 7-day provision, unfair labor charges, negotiation of contracts, interest, contract arbitrations, you name it, I've pretty much had experience with it. And that, I think, will be a valuable resource for me in tackling issues that come up. And with labor management, the real key there is not just confronting the issue, but resolving the issue. And that is something that I took great pride in working with management to resolve many of the issues. And the pride I took is that most of the issues we were always able to meet and figure out a solution that worked for both sides. Sometimes, of course, we got to arbitrate matters, but I tried to keep that far and few between, because I think that's how you move things along and maintain the relationships that you need to make sure that management issues are addressed properly and resolved fairly. most of my experience with management issues, I'll qualify that it has been with police departments because my longest and oldest client is Shopo. But if you look at the comparison, the judiciary, the biennial budget, I think, is 214 million or so this year, 212 million next year, and we have about 1,700 positions. If you look at HPD, they have 2,500 positions, 29 divisions, and their budget is 300+ million north. And so it's actually a bigger organization. But what I see, because we've already seen some of the issues that come up through the judiciary, is that any large-sized organization that has employees, the problems are very common. They're common throughout. So I am confident that the issues are something that I can manage, but more importantly, can resolve and resolve quickly. We have a great structure in place. Chief Justice Rectenwald left the judiciary in a very, very strong position, both structurally and operationally. And Chief Justice McKenna has continued to nurture that structure. We had a good succession plan where we had Brandon Kimura coming in as the administrative director, who succeeded Rodney Miley, and his deputy, Dalen Rose Heather. I worked with them before, and we have youth on our side with those two individuals. And the hope is that they will stay and continue on in that position for a long time. They are very capable. They work hard. We had a power outage. Things come up here and there yesterday. They work 24/7. And I have much admiration for them. But it's my hope, if I'm fortunate to be passed through this honorable body, that they will continue to be there. I know that we have inefficiencies in the system. There always are. That is something that I'd like to tackle right away and identify them right away. Performance gaps. I think there's a lot of room for modernization. As Chief Justice Rectenwald alluded to, I co-chaired the AI committee. We've already started looking at AI tools to see how they can help us with our inefficiencies. We have translators and interpreter shortages. We have court reporter shortages. And when you talk about those things, we're talking about access to justice. You don't have an interpreter, you don't have court transcripts coming out, the cases don't move. And to me, those are real problems. We also have shortage of attorneys. We have less and less attorneys coming through the bar. And they say that 40% of the current bar is over the age of 60. That's a problem because we have less attorneys available to help those that need attorneys assigned to them. We just put together a group committee that's going to study why it is that we're trending down on attorneys. In my lifetime, I never thought that we would have a shortage of attorneys, but that seems to be the case, and it's something that has to be addressed right away to ensure that we continue to have access to justice. And that's something that concerns me, and I want to make sure it's addressed as quickly as possible. Some have asked, how would you describe your management style? I said, well, how would you see me? How do you view me from what you know of me? And they said, well, one, you're very decisive. You don't play around with things, but I'm a very active listener. I want to find out and get as much information as I can, but I also don't like to extend things out too far. Otherwise, you're not decisive. And I like to move things along quickly. That is my work ethic, is to move as quickly as possible. With any assignment, any job that I've given, from when I was a recruit school, going to college, going to law school, in my practice, I always gave 100% of myself. And that is something that I would pledge that I would do, and do whatever it takes to get the job done. But to do it at a high level is what I always strive for. I appreciate the time here and available for any questions.
Thank you. Members, questions? I'll start with Senator Law.
So I'll lighten it real quick and say that I appreciate everybody who gets up here and says that, hey, local boy, born and raised. 4 years ago, it wasn't like that. Anyway, I thought that was light. Getting to this though, Vad, you got the doer mindset, you can do the work, ear to the ground, a pulse for the people, broad range of support. You talked about the hardest part of the job, but the hardest part might be this process that you're going through now, this time around, especially with some of what the opposition said and what the media has pointed to. What is your response? I haven't heard it yet. What is your response to the criticism of your political past?
I'll say this, when I was answering the questions of the JDC application, my perception, and granted there's some subjectiveness in some of the questions, degree of subjectiveness. As a private attorney, my perception and how I viewed those questions was my practice involved representing public labor unions, public organizations, and the related labor activities. I did not view that as a negative in and of itself or a negative reflection on me, and that was my perception. However, in talking with several members of this committee and hearing the sentiments that were conveyed to me, and how political committees may have opposed a candidate or expended resources, I certainly understand and appreciate that perception and the expectation to disclose. It wasn't my intention at all, and I'm very sorry and regret that it came across that way.
Mahalo for that. I appreciate that. One more to tag on to that. There was the one testifier who brought up a particular union, and the fear there would be, hey, this union is very influential currently in the administration, and now it'd be in the judiciary as well. What is your response to that?
Well, first of all, I have a very rigorous conflict screening procedure in my office. And I also consult with the Judicial Conduct Commission anytime we have a question. And I've done that in the past, especially when I first came on, because I had to get a feel as to what they sense was a potential conflict or what should be disclosed and so on. But I'll tell you one letter that I saw that was submitted to you folks, and that was from, I believe he's Professor Lawson up at the UH Law School. And what struck me was that he said 5 years ago he could not support me, and it was because of the heavy law enforcement and union involvement that I had. But that he carefully watched me on the bench over the last 2 years. And he said that record and how I discharged my duties caused him to write and to support me. And he said that this is the kind of judge you want, who doesn't come in with an ideological bend or an agenda. But it was that law enforcement and union that obviously raised serious concerns for him. And so that's something that I thought he could see, that one, we have to be impartial. It's not a choice. It's a mandatory requirement, and I adhere to that. I will continue to adhere to that. And if there's any conflicts on anything, I make the proper disclosure. If it's an actual conflict, I immediately recuse. And if you check my record, that's what I've always done in the cases that have come before me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Other questions?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, okay, go ahead. Someone Troy.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Justice Evans, for meeting with us outside as well as here. As I had discussed earlier with you, it's not my concern of you being an attorney. I know you are super smart. You're intelligent. Your record speaks for itself. And in fact, when we talked about it, being an attorney myself, sometimes we have to represent the most odious clients. And it's not that kind of relationship that I'm concerned about. It is, I want to know what your relationship is with PRP. Can you at least generally describe that?
I will tell you, other than being part of that committee, I had no relationship with them before, nor did I have a relationship with them after. They were never a client. I've never represented them. My primary union clients were, of course, Shopo, because I was with them for the longest, UPW, and the teachers. Those were my primary clients. I did some work for HFFA before when they called me, I did some work for HGA when they called upon me. I also collaborated with UPA when they called upon me, and when Tony Gill was still alive and representing them. Those are my primary clients. And toward the tail end of my legal career, ILW brought us on. But I've never represented PRP. I've never represented the carpenters.
So, like I said, it's not your affiliation as an attorney that concerns me because, you know, like I said, I was an attorney too. I've been court appointed with the most, like I said, odious clients, and we are required to. That's the basic tenets of doing our best job for our clients. It's the fact that you were listed as a director, not as an attorney, as a director on a 3-director panel, only 3 directors for Be Change Now. You said you haven't represented them, but Be Change Now, I mean, why don't you give us generally, I don't want to speak on your behalf, so what is your relationship with Be Change Now then? Because you are listed as a director, so let's talk about that.
Yes, I think, I thought you had asked me earlier about PRP, and I said, other than that political committee, that was my only relationship or involvement with them.
Is the political committees Be Change Now?
Yes.
Okay, so Be Change Now, you were listed as a director, 3 directors from 2018 to 2022. Why did you join as a director for Be Change Now?
I was asked to come on, and with many of these other committees or boards that I joined, they like to have an attorney on the board, and I serve in sort of it's a useful resource for the board. It was the same way that I served with Crime Stoppers Honolulu, which was another board that I was on. And time to time, they have legal questions. It's easy to just ask someone on the board who's an attorney, and I'm always happy to serve in that capacity. That was basically, it was a fairly limited role, but it was more that role than anything else. It's the same thing I did with Crime Stoppers. It's convenient for a committee and board to have an attorney, and it was just something that I was happy to do. But other than that type of role, that was pretty much it. I didn't have any further relations with PRP or the carpenters or...
Did you form Be Change Now as an attorney?
No, I did not.
Okay. So you were not listed as of counsel to Be Change Now. You were a director.
Yes.
And you were a director, and according to Be Change Now, basically, the reason for the purpose of Be Change Now is political, right? It is to promote politicians who they believe are for the betterment of Hawaii. I mean, basically, I think that's what it says. So you know that it was a political action committee that was being formed, that you joined.
Yes.
And knowing, I mean, summa cum laude, magna cum laude, smart person, been involved with labor. You also know that PRP, prior to being created, prior to Be Change Now, had a huge pilikia with Cayetano and and had a defamation claim by Cayetano against them. So you know that this negative publicity type of campaign, there has been a history of it with PRP and their political action committees. So prior to you joining being part of Be Change Now, you do know that.
Yes.
Okay. 2022 election, Be Change Now was involved in a massive, at least $2 million campaign against Sylvia Luke. Huge negative publicity. Were you involved in the decision-making regarding that huge negative publicity?
I'll tell you, it'd be inappropriate for me to disclose the internal business, but I will tell you again that my role was pretty much limited to what I described earlier.
Which means that doesn't really answer the question. The question was, were you involved in the decision-making for the $2 million campaign that occurred in 2022 against Sylvia Luke?
That wasn't really my role, Senator. And, when you talk about unions and political activities, I think almost all the union representatives you see here today are involved some degree in some form of political activity. When I had SHOPO, we had a political committee in-house, and they often asked me to participate on that committee, especially if a candidate was coming forward that was an attorney, because they wanted that insight to it. But it's something that is just part of the business of the unions. What they see is advancing their interests for their union members, and it's really just that.
And I understand that. And but the reality is, PRP has that history, right? Against Kayakan, a multi-million-dollar campaign. They lost a defamation suit, and now they created this other this other PAC called Be Change Now, involved in another negative campaign. And you resigned in 2022. Why?
I really wasn't doing much then, and I also had a personal decision that I was making with my law firm.
Has that got anything to do with your application for justice a few months later?
No.
Okay. So it's just coincidental that when you applied, you are not a member of Be Change Now, and so you did not feel that you needed to disclose your affiliation with Be Change Now.
Well, I wouldn't say coincidental. It just turned out that way.
And no, we have confirmed other labor lawyers before, but it's that particular campaign compared to like HGA, HSTA, they're more positive. The negative multi-million-dollar campaigns has the power not only to have the negative publicity, not only to negatively affect that particular campaign, but it also has the effect, and I believe because Be Change Now was created solely for this, to intimidate potential politicians to not engage, to not oppose PRP. And that is the big problem I have with a multi-million-dollar negative campaign and not these other supportive campaigns that the other unions have. So I just want on the record whether or not you, as one of the three directors, only three, of Be Change Now, were you part of the decision-making of this negative campaign, which had the dual purpose of negatively affecting that campaign, as well as intimidating politicians for ever opposing PRP or the carpenters?
That wasn't my role, Senator.
Okay. Were you paid as a director, as one of the three directors for Be Change Now?
No. And I, like Crime Stoppers as well, it's not paid, it's just what you volunteer to do.
Okay.
Should we do rounds?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, first let me follow up on a couple of things that Senator Sanborn and Chura said. It's a little unclear to me what the dates were that you actually did work for, when you were a board of director for Be Change Now. The Business Registration Division says it was at least as early as 2019, and that you were still a director in April of 23. Is that correct?
No, I had stepped off, and I know the paperwork, whether it was updated or not, but I don't remember if it was 18 or 19. I don't remember clearly on that.
Okay, well, the business, so I was giving you the benefit of the doubt on the latter date because you were still a board member until after we had confirmed you the first time, December of 23, you were still on the board.
Well, I had already, in June, have told them that I was.
Okay,
my
so
intention
fair
of
enough.
stepping
So
down.
in April of 23, you were still on the board then?
Well, they listed me.
But you said okay,
I didn't
when
consider
when
myself.
did you resign? June of 23?
In June, I gave my notice, and it was July.
Of 23?
Yeah, no, 22.
Okay, so Be Change Now went on a regular cycle where because I think their registration comes up once a year, and I believe it's in April, and they still counted you as a board member then, and I just don't understand. I don't understand. So if you resigned in June of 22, then why did they you up in April of 23 and then not take you off until December of 23?
Yeah, I don't know if something, I'd be expecting, I know something slipped through the cracks or whatever, and I hope I don't have my dates mixed up as well, Senator. I'm not sure.
On the, let's see here, where is it? On the 2023 JSC application, there is a.
I'm sorry, which year?
The 2023.
2023.
The first time we
okay.
confirmed you. There's a question, list activities in civic or charitable organizations and the approximate dates of each activity. Would you have, if you had been on the board of Be Change Now at the time you filled out this application, would you have felt obligated to put down that you are on the board of Be Change Now?
No, and I looked at that question, because that question called for civics and charitable organizations, and I wouldn't consider a political committee either one of those.
Okay, is there anywhere on the JSC where you felt like you should have put down that you were a board member of Be Change Now? If you had been at the time that you filled out the application?
If it was a current affiliation.
Okay, where would you have put it in then?
I can't remember exactly what I thought there was some question on that.
Well, see, that's the category that seemed like the most logical place to put it. But this is why is why the dates are important, because if you didn't step down until the middle of June of 2023, then on your initial application, you didn't indicate anywhere that you're a member of one of the most powerful political organizations in the state. I personally find that less. For full disclosure, my wife worked for PRP for a couple of years, so it's not that part of it's not the big deal to me. But the fact that you would leave off something that important would be if the dates don't match up. And if you could provide us, if you could figure out when you actually quit, if you've got a letter or something, that would be important to me.
Yeah, I think it had to have been 2022. And on that particular question, whether I was on or off, I wouldn't have found it to have been responsive to civics or a charitable organization.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at everything else. I mean, if nothing else, the questions that we asked you in 2020, that my committee asked you, or my staff asked you in 2023, there's one that's very broad. It just says, is there anything important that you think should be included? And it wasn't. There's no answer there.
Well, it was information about. It says information about yourself, unfavorable information about myself. I just, for me in representing.
I don't think that's what it said. Keeping in mind that the preferred policy is that appointees err on the side of full disclosure, please provide any information about yourself that might be viewed unfavorably by the Senate, regardless of whether a formal charge or complaint was filed against you. So you're on the board of one of the PRP affiliates, which, okay, that's fine. But it's hard to understand how you didn't know that could be viewed negatively by the Senate when they were just getting bad press like day after day, week after week at that point.
Because it's just, as a practicing attorney, it's just work that we do. And I didn't consider that work to be a negative or unfavorable reflection on me. I've had other unions that supported other candidates from other parties in that same election. But is that a reflect?
But you mentioned those, so that's the difference.
Well, I didn't, as far as who they chose or whatever
No,
activities I may have
but
been involved in with them.
You mentioned Shopo, you mentioned all the other unions.
Unions,
Do you were not affiliated with, but worked with or represented, or so if that's your answer, that's fine. I would like to see it's something that says when you tried to step down from the Be Change Now board.
It was June that I informed them that I was intending to step down
Was it in writing,
for
or
July.
did you just call them?
Might have been both, I don't remember.
Okay, if you could look for that, I'd appreciate it. I won't hog the hole. Anybody else have questions? Senator Chang, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to first follow up on an earlier question about your experience representing law enforcement. We heard yesterday and today we recommended the confirmation of 2 judges nominated to the circuit courts who had served both as public defenders and also as prosecutors. Your experience is primarily with law enforcement, and of course, as a justice, you're required to be objective and not reflexively take a side in criminal cases. Can you give any examples to this committee of your ability to be objective and not be biased in favor of law enforcement?
I don't know about a specific example, but there was a recent case where the opinion required that interrogations be recorded, both video and audio, and it was a divided court, but I was on the side that made that requirement mandatory, and I heard some comments that they thought I was anti-police, and I make the call the way I see it. And when I first came on the bench, of course, the preconception is that law enforcement, police officer, and all of that. But what I also said was, if there's anyone who should be able to recognize that there was a violation of someone's rights, I hope it's me, because of my experience, because I was putting criminal procedure into practice as a police officer, that I hope I would have greater insight into whether or not there is a violation or not, and to make sure that it's corrected. So that's the only real example I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure there's other cases that we've had over the course that I've been there. I apologize that I just can't think of any others, but that was a more recent case that we had.
Thank you. Is the Office of the Public Defender properly resourced, in your opinion?
Well, I just heard that there may be some considerations on cutting their budget, and it's raised some alarm bells, lack of a better way of putting it, for them. And I don't want to speak out of turn, but if you lose attorneys there, that would be devastating, in my personal view, because I think already it's a struggle for them to staff what they need to, with the amount of work they have, the amount of cases that need diligent attorneys that aren't spread too thin. So it's a personal concern for me.
Speaking of those lack of resources, do you believe that more criminal cases should be tried as opposed to plea bargained?
Well, I think each case is, case by case. I mean, there's reasons for pleading and there's reasons for trying a case. I don't have opinion one way or the other, but I would hope whatever decision is made is because you had an attorney available to guide you. And it's not because of a lack of not having an attorney or lack of resources to defend yourself that would cause you to make certain decisions. Those are the things that I'd be concerned about.
Well, in addition to the lack of resources to pay defenders, there may also be a lack of resources to, for example, retain an expert to weigh in on sentencing or
No question.
Fitness to stand trial.
No question.
Are those resources, do you believe those are sufficient?
I don't know how they're budgeted right now and what their demands are, so I'm not sure. I can't answer that here. But I'm sure that's an ongoing concern for them as expert fees go up. And the price to try a case is just very expensive, and it's always an access to justice issue.
Are there too many people with mental illness in our correctional system? And what can be done about it?
I don't know what the stats are offhand, as far as what the population percentage is. But I can tell you, having been a police officer in Honolulu, that I always thought there was a lack of services, a lack of opportunities provided to those that really needed help, that locking them up wasn't the answer because they get right back on. And, it's more costly to the community, I thought, to run it that way rather than putting the appropriate amount aside to see if you can really give them the proper treatment and turn them around to avoid that in and out cycle. But I know it always comes down to resources and funding, and that's always a tough call for you folks.
To switch gears a little bit, in the 2018 case, City and County of Honolulu versus State of Hawaii, the Supreme Court considered a constitutional amendment, which was on the ballot, to establish a surcharge on investment real property to be used to support public education. It held that the term surcharge on investment real property was unconstitutionally vague because voters might be misled that it would not affect their taxes. In the event, the ballots had already been printed and the votes were counted, contrary to the Supreme Court's order, and 70% of the voters voted no, implying that they did understand the question and voted for real property taxes not to go up. Do you believe that question was too vague? And what level of deference is owed to the elective legislative branch of government and to the intelligence of the voters?
Because of the position I'm in now, I obviously can't give a comment or opinion on that. But what I can say is that as a court, due deference has to be given to the legislature with certain presumptions and assumptions as the legality of the statutes that are passed. Obviously wasn't on the court at that time, but that issue may come up again, and therefore I would have to reserve direct comment on it on that at this time. And I'm sorry that I couldn't say more.
Thank you. I have further questions, Chair, but I'll let others have a chance.
All right, we've been going for a while. Let's take a quick, let's see, that clock says 10:44. Why don't we come back at 10:50 and we'll continue from there. So brief recess. Okay, coming back in on our 9:40 agenda for nomination for Chief Justice. I think I'll turn to Senator Gabbard next. I believe you had some questions. Okay,
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
Chair. Justice Devens, you mentioned in your opening statement that court delays and the backlog remain a concern. So what specific reforms would you implement in your first year to reduce those backlogs?
Well, already, you folks recently consented to Judge Gluck, so obviously that's going to help at the IEC level. We see the increased volume from the cert applications, which indicates that the ICA is pushing out a lot of decisions. So the more volume we see, the more they are producing decisions there that are then being appealed to us. One of the first things I'd want to do is to meet with Chief Justice Nakasone to see what other adjustments possibly can be made, what help she may need to see how we can chop the backlog down even further. But just to find out what the lay of the land is first and what she needs, what adjustments can be further can be made to ensure that we can bring it to within a manageable, reasonable time span.
And also, what steps would you take to improve access to justice, especially for underserved communities in our state?
There was always our Chief Justice Rectenwell was the biggest proponent I know of access to justice. And I think it's incumbent on whoever is going to be taking this next position to continue that process of making it even wider. I went to a recent, maybe not so recent, a conference about a year ago at NYU Law School, and one program they're advocating is to try and get the big firms to commit a certain amount of hours from their associates to dedicate to access to justice, but credit those hours against the total hours they're supposed to make for the firm. In other words, they would donate or give those hours in handling access to justice cases, because then you can try and dedicate an attorney to actually see a case from start to finish, rather than just giving spot advice and help here and there. That is one program I'd like to see if that would get any traction here. I'd like to also talk with the other jurisdictions to see what new innovations they have with access to justice, but that is obviously a top priority, and it should be for the judiciary.
Thank you, Justice. Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Other questions, members? Okay, Senator Hara is not on the committee, but it's been my practice in the past to allow other members to ask questions, as Senator San Buenaventura can attest to. And so go ahead, Senator Hara.
And it's been a number of years since I've been on the Judiciary Committee. We've had some interesting confirmations and fulfilling our constitutional role of advice and consent. As I appreciate nominee speaking with me for quite a while, and I appreciate your candor, your honesty, and I would say correcting the public perception. And as you know, my interest is throughout my career of public trust in government, and the judiciary, I think, can be the most, or should be the most trusted branch of government free from political influence. And so I wanted to ask, and so there's a concern, well, maybe I'll start out with this. What is your perception of the public's view of your role in the last confirmation? First of all, I accept your apology. I know it was a mistake, and you should have, as I agree with you, you should have disclosed it. It was, I think, pretty significant, and I accept your apology. So I accept you as a justice full, and by all accounts, you've been a excellent justice in the Supreme Court. So I want to acknowledge that as from what I know. So I wanted to ask you, how do you see the public's view of you in the last round with the error? And I'm thinking that this process here is about whether you have the discernment to be a chief justice beyond a justice, and whether you can distinguish between a justice's discretion and discernment to a chief justice's discernment and discretion and responsibility and accountability, and public, in a way, the holder of public trust for the branch. And so I wanted to first ask you what your take is from back then, and also the current state of public trust in your role and the judiciary, and PRP, all that gets mixed in, and it's all public perception. It could be right, could be wrong, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to update the public perception.
Well, public trust is everything, Senator, and so is my integrity. That's everything to me and the only thing I have. And so public trust is of paramount importance to me. If there is any hesitation on that, I would like to do everything I possibly could to reassure that I take my job very seriously. I take my oath very seriously. The duties that are imposed on me now, I take very seriously. When it comes to any sense of a conflict or any of that sort, that I've always immediately recused on anything like that. If it was even a close call, I made a disqualification, and I think on some of the close calls, I decided myself to recuse, even when the Judicial Commission said it would be okay. It was just that I was very mindful of that perception, that I took those steps myself. So it is very important to me, and I, of course, want to do everything I can to ensure that I have the trust of this body and the trust of my colleagues and the trust of the judiciary and all those that work in that branch.
Thank you. So how did you, do you understand that to be changed now, the board you were on, the nonprofit board, a nonprofit board is not necessary to have a PAC, super PAC.
Wait, I'm sorry, I missed it.
Not a political action committee does not have to have a nonprofit. This is a nonprofit. It was a registered nonprofit, subject to the laws, the Hawaii Nonprofit Act, which is more stringent than a regular PAC. You have to take minutes and all of that. So I wanted to understand how you viewed Be Changed Now. Did you understand that they were a political influence organization?
Oh, it was clearly a political action committee. I don't think there was any doubt about that. What I had conveyed is that the way I viewed my role, it was limited in the sense that there was a certain usefulness in what, as a lawyer on that committee and other committees that I've served on. And that's basically how I saw the position. And I don't mean to play down all the things that you have said. I acknowledge that, the other perceptions. Yes.
So I'm trying to understand, to what extent you appreciated the, well, Be Changed Now is a political influence organization. It's designed to influence, which is fair. No problem with that. And I'm trying to, because I hear on the one hand, you're kind of just the pro bono attorney in a way, but you're also on the nonprofit board. Let me ask you, I'll ask you some questions I asked you when we were together. Did you see, so one is you acknowledge having voted for the expenditure of the, I don't track, was it $2 million or whatever it was? I don't, but during the period when you're a fiduciary on that organization, do you acknowledge having voted as an organization, we required to vote to expend the funds for these ads?
I don't know if it's appropriate for me to be, discussing internal business, but I don't remember those kinds of details. I just don't. And I'll just say, you had responsibilities divided up. And maybe that's the best way I can explain it.
Well, as an attorney, I'm going to presume all the laws are followed, so I'm not going to quibble with that. And neither do I even suspect. So I just want to stipulate that, so there would be the minutes of the organization, which are not public, but they're available to the members. And the minutes would show that the board, at least by 2 out of 3 of the members, voted to approve the expenditure of the ads. So do you acknowledge that would be the case?
If that happened.
Right.
I assume I have not seen the minutes myself, so I don't have personal knowledge.
Well, so is that a proper assumption or proper presumption that that's what probably happened?
I don't know because I haven't seen the minutes.
No, but as an attorney, okay, I'm testing your attorney skills, I'm not an attorney, that as an attorney, and actually the attorney for the board, right, for the 3, that's your role. You would ensure. right?
Oh, sorry.
You're the role, so you're advising the three as you came on for that role. That was why you're there. And you didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the politics of things, as I understand it. And so you focus on that. And so that's why I'm asking the question about, the board's attorney, that they would have taken the votes as required by the Nonprofit Act of Hawaii. You're familiar with that, right? Okay, and so you have to have minutes, you have to have agenda, at least you can do an email, I think. Email, we're gonna meet this time officially for the record. Besides your informal talks, just for the business part, you have to have a business meeting. Besides, where you have to make it official. Sometimes it's pro forma. But I was presumed that you would advise them to just do the pro forma business, right?
Yeah, one thing is that, I wasn't the per se attorney on the, for the committee, but they would time to time have questions that they just ask, and without, divulging their internal business. I will tell you, similar to other organizations, they have questions, for example, like liability insurance. Is it the proper insurance? What do these liability provisions mean? Cannibalizing policies, laymen may not understand exactly what that is. Do we have proper D&O insurance? Are the policy limits proper? It was more, that's more what I'm used to answering in terms of questions that lay members may have.
Okay, that helps clarify things a little bit. I'm going to ask you a pointed question. Did you see the ads against whomever? Was it Takuda, Luke, and maybe others? I don't know. Did you see those ads before they were aired?
First time I saw them was on TV.
If you had to vote on it, would you have voted to, well, so how did you, sorry, I'm presuming it was sort of, it had a nasty tone to it, but how do you characterize those ads? The worst of the ads?
I don't remember the specifics to any one of those ads, but just in general, when you say the candidate, I saw ads related to them. I'm sure I did.
So none of them made, for me, it was like a little cringeworthy. You don't see it very often.
Well, I have my personal opinions about just politics in general, on how things, I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
And I'll just say, it's one reason I'm not a politician.
So can you understand some public concern that the branch that should be the most furthest away from political influence might perceive that it might gotten a little closer than they would want by perception, by the error that is, forgiven? Do you see how that, I'm trying to see how, if we can sort of heal that or cure that or repair that, and a Chief Justice can do that.
No, I do. And as I said earlier, I regret that it even came across that way. And you're absolutely right in terms of perception. That's very important to me. That's something I learned when I was a police officer, perception, how the public perceives us. That's something I understand your concern and the point you're raising. And I agree with you in terms of doing whatever I can to ensure that I have public trust. And I hope that going forward, if I'm given the opportunity, that my performance and my record will reflect that trust and doing the job. And I'm not sure if you hear earlier, Senator, but one of the letters that caught my attention was from Professor Lawson, who said 5 years ago he had serious would express serious concerns about me because of my background. And he said law enforcement and unions, but that my discharge of my duties, my performance as a justice on the High Court, seemed to earn his trust to the point that he was compelled to write a letter of support. And I hope I can continue doing that with my actions going forward, if given the opportunity.
Chair, I have just two more questions,
Yep,
and
go
I
ahead.
appreciate your indulgence. You had said that you had resigned from Be Change Now in July, effectively, July 2022. You had applied for the Intermediate Court of Appeals, ICA, that month. Is that correct?
Yes,
That's what your
I
application-
withdrew that application.
When did you withdraw it? When did you file it, and when did you withdraw it?
I don't
And then
remember
how-
when
and
it
then-
was withdrawn.
And then did you, see, let me try to, so did you, where was the resignation in between? So you have two dates, your application and withdraw, and then there's a third date, which is when you resign. So where do the two dates fit, and where does
Yeah,
this
I-
resignation fit?
In June, I gave them notice of my intention to step down.
Effective
As
July
of
1?
July.
Okay.
Yes. And that's 2022.
Right. And then when did you withdraw it?
I don't remember.
It's
I don't
because
remember if
later on, a few months later, you applied for the Supreme Court.
I applied for the Supreme Court, I think it was the latter part of 2023.
November 2022.
No, I'm sorry, 2022.
Yeah, I just go by
I'm
the
sorry that I
date.
mixed up my
Yeah,
dates.
no, my memory's just as bad, and so
Oh,
that's why,
okay, I'm
that's
sorry.
why, well, that's why records helps. Recollection and a hearing is not as good. It's
Yeah, no,
helpful to have.
I think you're right, November 2022.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, so, and it just, public trust, we're talking about public trust, and some pundits believe that the appointing authority was elected by the organization you were on the board. And then 3 weeks after the election, then you applied for the Supreme Court, having put it in earlier. So I'm not casting any aspersion. I'm saying that that's.
I can tell you how that happened.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm just saying that there's a public perception of incorrect, perhaps, but it's there. And so if we can kind of nuance it enough to that, we can, ideally, it would be puff to go away. I don't think it's going to go away like that. But if you can help, in a way, help the community heal, because I think it was hurtful for the community to have gone through this committee. I feel for the committee, having gone through the first time and having not have the most important piece of information of that year. This is 2022, and it's significant. And and I like the outcome, but it's how the process sometimes makes it a little bit more strenuous than more nerve-wracking than it needs to be.
Yeah, as far as when I applied for the High Court, that actually came about because a former justice came to talk to me and asked me to consider applying for that position. That was not on my radar. And you can believe it or not, I was not even aware like positions were coming up because I just had not been paying attention to that. And so that's how that came about, that I ended up applying. And if not for that person, I probably would not have applied. And it's a justice that I highly respect, I look up to, and has been I consider a mentor to me in both his judicial philosophy and his writings. And I want to maintain his confidence, but I will tell you that's how that came about. It was not anyone else that approached me about that.
You know, that you resigned from Be Change Now before you applied for the ICA does show discernment, right? It does show that you are aware to keep away potential perception of political influence on the judiciary, because if you had not, then you would be both a member of a political influence, the most important political influence organization of that year, and at the same time. So it showed discernment that you resigned, and so I appreciate that. And I would have wanted, and it was a mistake, to have that discernment carry over to the application to the JSC. But there was no explicit question. So my question is, would you support a question or clarification on the ICA, on the JSC application, to explicitly ask about political influence, the relationship of a nominee, a judicial nominee's relationship to any political influence activity? And the reason for that would be to have in the future, at least for public perception wise, we don't have anyone that it goes in that has ties that could have the public believe, wrongly perhaps, but public might think, especially conspiracy theory nowadays, that it's a done deal kind of thing. It's all the heavies going to come in and they're going to do their thing and they don't care about anything else. That's a dangerous perception. I would think you would agree. So so the question is, would you support, or do you think it's important to have an explicit question on the Judicial Selection Commission application for a nominee to disclose any kind of links to any political activity?
I don't want to comment on the legalities and asking some about their politics or religion, if that's, but I would tell you that I would have no problem answering that question. And if that was a question that directly asked me that, I have no problem answering it then as I would now. And it's because I think everyone who knew my practice and my clientele and the unions and so on assumed that there was some politics always in the background, just because of the nature of labor groups and the organizations. And I know when I was with the Shopo Labor Committee, there were different candidates that would come down that sought the endorsement and support. And was I part of the vetting process? They asked me to, as their chief counsel. But it was just the nature of the work that I was involved in. And yeah, so if that question was asked of me, I'd have no hesitation answering that. And I know that I think Senator Rhodes had made a comment that there was no direct question on political activity. And I don't remember if it was the JC application or your committee's own questions, but yeah, I'd have no hesitation answering that.
So if you were to meet the Senate's threshold, elevating you from a justice to a chief justice, maybe it would be a request, but maybe just consider it. Consider maybe, especially in your case, maybe I'm not sure what the powers of the Chief Justice rules or something like that, where through a rule or some way to add a question or to take steps to insulate the judiciary, since you've been kind of tainted, perhaps unfairly, that it might be an opportunity to actually give you root cause if you were to be Chief Justice, to take some steps to gain the public trust. The Chief Justice Reckonwell went into the community, because there was to address that, and I think it was very effective. So there it could be the same thing to do with having be a pure, clean civic activity, a judicial trust, and because at this point it does seem like there is a perception that more than necessary, more than I would want, and in part from the error, but I'm not sure how much we can cure it at this point.
And I appreciate that, Senator. I think one of the things that I would do is obviously consult with my former boss, Chief Justice Rechtenwald, to see what he did ask and what questions he did ask when he was considering district court positions, because I'm not privy to that. It was none of my business. And how Justice McKenna did it, but she had a chance to pick 3 recent judges and to see what her thought process was and to see what they would think about it. If that's something that could be incorporated, I'd have no issue with that.
Thank you.
All right. I'm happy to come back to
No,
you. Let's see if other
I'm
people have questions. Other questions, members?
Thank you.
No, okay, I have a few more. So going back to one of the questions that Senator San Buenaventura asked about the being on the board. So, I mean, presumably as a board member, you voted on whenever, I mean, people miss meetings, so I wouldn't, if your life is anything like mine, you don't always make it to every meeting you're supposed to make it to. So you might have missed some votes, but you would have had to vote on everything that was put before the Be Change Now board, correct?
Again, I don't think it's appropriate to disclose internal business, but if a vote was called and I was notified, sure.
Okay, but yeah, I mean, is internal business, I mean, it is how Be Change Now's board operated is of interest to me and to this committee, I think.
Yeah, if there was any recommendations, just in general, recommendations on voting a certain way because a director had vetted it and done whatever they were supposed to do as part of their responsibilities, then, and it came up for a vote, sure, I would.
You would have voted?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, but you don't, but that would mean that presumably you voted on all their expenditure, all their political campaigns in terms of, who they supported and who they didn't support. I mean, I know it's an independent expenditure, so they're not supposed to support them directly, but there's.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have general ideas, but I wasn't really the finance,
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I just wanted to know whether you actually voted on them or not. Let's see, any other question here? So I think maybe this has come up already, but if it's a repeat question, my apologies. So when you came before this committee in 2023, when we confirmed you unanimously, you didn't disclose that you were on the BCN board to this committee that time. Can you just explain again why? I don't understand how that piece of information was not relevant to our. I mean, whenever I find out something about a nominee through the press, especially if it's negative, I feel like probably it should have been just said up front at some point in the process. So what was your rationale for not saying anything about it during the 2023 confirmation?
Well, because of my background as the work that I was doing, it was just part of the everyday work that I do. And so there was nothing that stood out for me, my perception of my work and understanding of my perception as a private attorney.
Okay.
I don't think there was any question asked of me at the time, which maybe goes to Senator Ihara's suggestion about a question in the future, but.
No, but what question would you ask in that situation? Because
well, I think
we don't know. We don't know what we're looking for necessarily.
Right, but I think what Senator Ihara, if I heard him correctly, is suggesting that you ask a direct question, about any political activity, any political.
Well, so this is the 70th time I've been chair of the committee while we were confirming somebody, and what I've discovered over the years that we have tweaked our questions, the supplemental questions that we've done over the years, and you can't think of everything. And that's why,
I know.
and that's why we have these catch-all ones at the end saying, is there anything else that you want to tell us or you should tell us that would be relevant to our deliberation? And that's the part of it that's the hardest for me to take as the chair, is that I think it wouldn't have made any difference to me as the chair to know that you'd been on the board of the.
And it wouldn't have made any difference to me to have said it.
And that's, so why didn't you say it?
Because I didn't think it was a negative on me. It was just for the reasons I stated earlier. And it,
So the other question, the other thing that was brought up is that, you said you're not a politician, but I think that the job that you're, about to take is in many respects a political job. And the fact that you didn't see the political ramifications of not saying anything, I admit does concern me, because, Justice Rechtenwald was wrong. We might need to change the law to make it so that CJs have to register as lobbyists, because he was up here all the time talking to me and the money guys. And, there's part of your job will be just like it is now on the legal side, but part of it's going to be very political, and you need to have good judgment about what you need to reveal and what you need to not reveal.
I didn't mean it in that sense, because I understand that part of the job, but I'm talking about actual campaigning and doing that kind of stuff. I understand the legislative side to it and having to lobby and so on. I didn't mean it that way.
Okay. Okay, there are two other, hang on a second, let me just finish this. I did also have a question about the minutes. You said that you didn't see the minutes at the, at Be Change Now, the board. Wouldn't you just automatically be given the minutes at the next meeting?
I didn't track that.
Okay, so you think you might have gotten minutes, or you didn't?
If they did, I just didn't track that.
Okay, so I have two other items that are admittedly hard for me to bring up. I feel obligated. So there was I'm assuming Darren Cacciola was somebody that you probably represented when you were with Shopo, he was accused of, the police department, HPD tried to fire him, and he ended up getting suspended. And anyway, you recognize the name, you know him?
Yes.
Is he a personal friend of yours?
No, I represented Shopo, and he was a grievant in a case they assigned to us to litigate.
So he had a going away party, and this is from a Civil Beat article. As a final goodbye to policing, Cacciola distributed a flyer inviting family and friends to a retirement party on August 22, just last year, 2022. It reads, "The man, the myth, the legend," and contains a photo of a protester holding a sign with Cacciola's face next to the faces of Derek Chauvin, the Minneapolis police officer convicted of killing George Floyd in 2020, and George Zimmerman, the Florida Neighborhood Watch volunteer who shot and killed Trayvon Martin in 2012. And then there's another story, I think it was one of the TV stations, said that you attended that party. How did you find out about that party?
Somebody had told me about it.
Okay.
And so.
And why did you feel like you needed, if he wasn't a personal friend, why did you feel like you needed to go?
Former client.
So okay, so
that's
it. Former client.
That's it.
You go to, okay, I'll leave it at that then. Let's see, there was one other thing. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, yeah. The other question I had was, after you left Be Change Now, did you have a falling out with the guys over there, with the men and women over there? Because there's no...
At where?
At PRP, at Be Change Now.
No.
Because I noticed that in 2023, you put a PRP official on there as one of your references, but you didn't put him on in 2026. And then for today's hearing, I don't know every individual, but there was no PRP Be Change Now testimony in your support.
I don't know if they support me or not.
Every other union in the state does support you. So I was just curious whether there'd been some sort of falling out between you and them.
Not that I know of, but I really don't know the people there. If you look at my recent application, I actually changed out other names as well. I actually changed out the justices' names as references, so it wasn't just that one.
Okay. All right, members.
Yeah, I have.
Senator San Buenaventura, go ahead.
Sorry, just a few follow-up questions. Okay, one of the basic tenets of being a judge is to avoid the appearance of impropriety, right? And I know you were not a judge at the time, but the appearance of undue influence of PRP, Be Changed Now, overshadows your application, especially since we are talking about being Chief Justice, okay, which is the highest position in the judiciary system. You're in charge of judges. You're also in charge of attorneys, right? Disciplinary. I mean, I looked at the list of the disciplinary cases you look at. As Chief Justice, you get to nominate district court judges. You also get to influence law, not only as a sitting member of the Supreme Court in being able to write decisions, but if you are on the winning side of a decision, you get to appoint who gets to write the opinion. And you know the opinion then gets followed further down. And that opinion can last longer than legislators are around, or even administrative judges. I don't know if you can't. We know you're a smart man. We know that, look at all the people who are supporting you. I mean, it appears that as an attorney, as a member of the bar, you have held yourself high. I mean, we don't have anybody opposing like I said, sometimes as attorney, we represent odious clients, but we don't even see any of those odious clients opposing you. It's all this undue influence on a branch of the government where, we already know the administrative branch. When he ran for lieutenant governor, he got $1 million and got himself away from a pack of very competent people like Jill Takuda running against him, but that PRP money, at least there was no negative publicity, so we're not counting that up, but it elevated him. His chief of staff is a former PRP lobbyist, and with that kind of influence, and now a second branch of the government with a potential of not just being an attorney, you are one of 3 directors, okay, which has a different fiduciary duty than that of an attorney. Being elevated to that point, we have seen the federal government when the MAGA groups influence multiple branches of the government, that it's difficult for minority interests to be heard. I mean, how do you assuage the public concern that this outsized influence, because you are in an appointed position, they don't get to elect you. They rely on us to confirm you. How do you assuage the public where this branch of the government could also be subject to outside influences?
Well, I'll answer it very simply with this, because it's judicial independence, and we have to protect that at all costs. And that is what I've done since I've ascended to the bench, and that's what I will continue to do.
Okay.
Okay, members, other questions? Senator Chang.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. Justice, do you believe that the facilities of the judiciary are secure?
You know, that's another ongoing issue that we have right now. And I think part of it is, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but it's something that we're addressed with. I know there's a bill going through right now to see if we can get supplemental security. But for me personally, with my law enforcement background, you need armed guards at a courthouse. It's too easy to get in right now, at least to the Supreme Court. But I also understand there's a staffing shortage with the sheriffs. So I think the resources are being taxed. There's not enough bodies, so to speak, to go around. And so, yes, my answer is yes, that there are security issues. Are they being looked at? Yes, they are. Are they trying to be addressed? Yes, they are. But that would certainly be a priority for me, because I think nationwide, and we see it here too, that the threats against judges has gone up, with several judges actually being seriously injured and killed.
In 2023, the state of Hawaii achieved gender parity on the bench for the first time in history. Do you think that gender parity should be maintained?
You know, I'm always sensitive to that. You know, I got 3 girls of my own. I have 2 sisters of my own as well. And, you know, of course, we do everything on merit. And all things equal, I think that's something to keep in mind. I think we may have actually more females on the bench right now than males, if I'm not mistaken. But I think being sensitive to that is very important.
I think it's fair to say that gender parity is one of the legacies, one of the top handful of legacies for your predecessor, C.J. Rechtenwald. At the end of your term, if confirmed as Chief Justice, what would be the handful of items that you would like to see as your legacy?
You know, I think a priority for me is modernizing where we can judicial operations. Because of the staffing shortage, I think there's a lot of clerical sorting, those kind of tasks that bog down the staff and takes them away from maybe the more important duties. I hope that we can modernize that so that our operations are much more efficient, much quicker in response in providing services to the public and the attorneys. I wanted to do a top-to-bottom assessment to just see where the inefficiencies are, where the deficiencies are, get them identified right away, and those that can be resolved by quick solutions, get that done. The more long-term ones, try to prioritize them. You know, I went down to the First Circuit Court building during the holidays to visit with a judge there, and you know, you see the tiles open, hoses hanging down, rubbish cans in the hallways where the public walks, and it's still like that the way it was when I was down there all the time. I understand we're getting the elevators fixed now, but I also understand it would have been $8 million if we did it earlier. Now it's like $15 million if I got the information correct. So hopefully to address those things. So modernizing, making things as easy as I can for the attorneys. That is a major concern for me, because if they're getting bogged down and there's obstacles to their practice, that has a domino effect on the representation they're providing. Making sure cases are moving as quickly as possible through the court system. I know that we put the fast track in our rules a few years ago. I'd like to see how efficient it is, because when I attend these bench bar conferences, it doesn't seem that those rules are really being implemented and used as I think the hope was. But, you know, if you look at the statutory duties of the Chief Justice, it's the efficient operations of the courts, and it's the expeditious dispatch of all court business. So to me, every decision should be wrapped around those 2 objectives. with any decision that a Chief Justice is making, and that I will keep in mind.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Other questions, members? Seeing none, decision-making on GM 801 will be on Friday, the 24th of April, in this room at 10 a.m. This is room 225. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your responses, and thanks to all of you for participating. We're adjourned.